I've always believed that family was supposed to be a safe haven, the place you return to after the world has bruised you. But for me, family has always felt like a word dangled in front of me, like a key to a locked door I wasn't allowed to open. My name is Clara, I'm 30 years old, and if you ask anyone in my family, I'm the outsider. Not because I was adopted, not because I was a stepchild, no. My mother and father are as much mine as they are anyone else's. The problem, at least from their perspective, is that I never fit their idea of what a daughter should be. My older sister Victoria was the golden child, the one with the dazzling smile and perfect grades. She went to private school, landed scholarships, and somehow managed to look like she had stepped out of a magazine every time she entered a room. My younger brother Ethan was the baby of the family, spoiled, adored, excused for every mistake because he's still finding himself. And then there was me, stuck in the middle. From the earliest days, I noticed the difference. When Victoria came home with a B, my parents rushed to hire a tutor, declaring how important it was to keep her on track for Harvard. When Ethan crashed my dad's car at 17, they bought him another one so he could learn responsibly. But when I worked 2 jobs to pay for my community college classes, my mother pursed her lips and said, well, maybe college just isn't for everyone. It wasn't just about money or attention. It was the subtle things, the way my father's eyes slid past me at dinner to linger on Victoria. The way my mother never asked me about my day but knew every detail about Ethan's. Even extended family gatherings followed the same script. I was the background character, the filler in family photos, the name people forgot until they saw me sitting quietly at the edge of the room. Still, I tried. God knows I tried. I thought if I worked harder, smiled more, made myself useful, maybe they would see me. Maybe they'd say, Clara, we're proud of you. But the words never came. One memory has always stayed with me. I must have been 9 years old. My aunt had bought 3 beautiful gift boxes for Christmas, one for each of us. Victoria's box held a silver necklace shaped like a star. Ethan's had a remote control car. And mine had socks. Plain white socks. Everyone laughed when I opened it, saying, well, at least they're useful. I laughed too, cheeks burning, pretending it didn't matter. But that night I cried into my pillow, the necklace and car flashing in my mind like forbidden treasures. That's what it was like being Mewy, useful, never cherished. By the time I reached adulthood, I had grown used to invisibility. I worked quietly, rented a small apartment, and poured myself into writing journals, short stories, things no one ever read. I didn't expect much from my family anymore, but some small part of me still longed for connection. That longing is what drew me back to them when Victoria announced her wedding. Her fiancé Daniel was everything my parents dreamed of for their daughter. Tall, handsome, from an old money family. A lawyer who drove a black Mercedes and had a smile that could charm anyone. From the moment they met him, my parents practically adopted him as their own. I, on the other hand, always felt something was off. His compliments were too polished, his laughter too rehearsed. But whenever I voiced my unease, my mother waved me off with, Clara, don't be jealous. Daniel is perfect for Victoria. So when the wedding planning began, I hoped naively that this might be my chance. Maybe this time I'd be included. Maybe I'd help plan, be asked to stand beside my sister as maid of honor, share in her joy. Instead, Victoria chose her best friend Isabella for the role. Ethan was the best man. The rest of the bridal party was filled with cousins and college friends. I was offered the role of guest. Don't take it personally, Clara, Victoria said one afternoon while sipping champagne during a fitting. You're just not really a wedding person. Besides, you'll still be there to celebrate. That's what matters. I smiled weakly, nodding, but inside I felt the familiar sting. Not family enough to stand beside her. Not even important enough to carry a bouquet. As the wedding drew closer, preparations consumed the household. Every phone call was about caterers, photographers, or floral arrangements. Every conversation at family dinners revolved around Victoria's dress fittings, the guest list, or Daniel's impressive connections, and me. I was given small menial tasks: picking up dry cleaning, driving Ethan when he forgot his tux fitting, running errands no one else had time for. It became painfully clear the wedding wasn't just about celebrating love. It was another stage, another chance for my family to parade Victoria's perfection before the world while I played the invisible extra. But what none of them knew, what even I didn't fully realize, was that beneath the satin dresses and champagne flutes, secrets were festering. And those secrets would one day explode in front of everyone, tearing apart the carefully crafted illusion of family. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Daniel. Everyone else had gone upstairs. I was tidying up after yet another planning dinner where my parents doted on him like he was their son. Daniel leaned against the counter, sipping his whiskey. His eyes lingered on me in a way that made my skin crawl. "You know, Clara," he said smoothly, "it's a shame no one appreciates you. You're actually the most interesting one in this family." I froze, unsure how to respond. His tone wasn't flattering, it was predatory, calculated. I mumbled something about needing to put dishes away and excused myself, heart pounding. From that moment, a seed of unease took root in me. Something was wrong. But in typical fashion, I told myself it didn't matter. No one would believe me anyway. The day before the wedding, my mother pulled me aside. Her voice was sharp, though she smiled as if we were sharing a pleasant secret. "Clara, tomorrow is important. Very important. This wedding is the biggest day of Victoria's life, and our family's reputation is on the line. I need you to be on your best behavior. No sulking, no drawing attention. Just sit quietly, smile, and let your sister shine. Do you understand?" I nodded. Of course I understood. That was my role, after all, to be invisible, to fade into the background, to never make waves. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way Daniel's eyes had lingered. Maybe it was years of being dismissed, belittled, forgotten. Whatever it was, I knew tomorrow would be different. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But deep in my bones, I felt it. This wedding would not go as planned. Morning broke in a pale wash, the color of old lace. The kind that looks lovely from a distance, but frays when you touch it. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand 5. Then 6 messages lighting the screen like warning flares. The group chat read, "Wedding Day," followed by a parade of confetti emojis from Isabella, a pastel bouquet from Victoria, and a curt utilitarian list from Mom, Clara. Be at St. Bartholomew's by 7:30 a.m. Sharp, volunteer coordinator needs extra hands. Wear something neutral and modest. You will sit back left during the ceremony. Don't be late. No good morning. No love you. Not even a please. Just assignments, positions, and an unspoken reminder, know your place. I stared at the ceiling a moment, the fan cutting the air into steady slices. Today was the day. The culmination of months of planning, years of favoritism, a lifetime of learning how to make myself small. I told myself I'd survive it the way I'd survived everything else, by staying quiet. By clenching the jaw and softening the eyes, by pretending it didn't hurt. I dressed in a simple charcoal dress with sleeves that hit just above the elbow, practical flats, and a thin silver necklace I'd bought myself for my last birthday. Something neutral and modest as requested. I braided my hair myself in the mirror, fingers steady even as my chest fluttered. My face in the glass looked composed, the way one looks composed for a mugshot. The ride to the cathedral took 20 minutes. The streets were still half asleep, early sun snagging in the windows of cafes, setting out chairs. I parked in the side lot where Father Thomas had told guests to leave their cars and walked around to the front steps. St. Bartholomew's rose like something from a postcard, stone ribs. Stained glass windows glimmering, a heavy wooden door with black iron hardware. The florist's van was already out front, buckets of white roses and eucalyptus spilling green and cream all over the sidewalk. "Clara, you're here at last." Lana, the wedding planner, hustled toward me, headset askew, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Her smile was a little too bright, like a paint job rushed to dry. "I'm on time," I said, checking my watch. She waved it off. "I meant finally in the existential sense," she said, with brittle cheer. It's going to be a busy morning. Your mother said you're happy to help with little things. How are you with ironing? Fine. Perfect. The groomsmen ties were packed wrong. I've got a steamer that hates me. Maybe it'll listen to you. Course. I took the steamer like a dutiful disciple and followed her inside. The cathedral's belly was cool, a hush wrapped in incense. Sunlight through the stained glass carved jewel tones into the pews afire. Ruby, a bruised amethyst that felt a little too unthose. We wound our way past the side chapel to a makeshift prep area where ivory ribbons, programs, and name cards lay in neat, bossy stacks. Here. Lana thrust a garment rack toward me. Groomsman Lounge is down that hall. Tie station is there. Don't breathe on Daniel's tux. God forbid it knows common air. She laughed. I didn't. The groomsman's suite was already buzzing. Ethan stood with two of Daniel's fraternity brothers, half-dressed and wholly loud. The smell of cologne was a wall. Ah, Clara, Ethan drawled, barely looking up. Mom said you were on errand detail today. I'm steaming your ties, I said, plugging in the iron. Perfect. I need mine extra crisp. Don't scorch it. He turned back to his friends. She's good at chores. Like, freakishly good. They laughed like I wasn't there. My skin prickled. I tongued the word chores, kept my face smooth, and began with the first silk strip, moving the steamer slowly so no water would spit. One by one, the ties gave up their wrinkles, became glossy as lies. Every now and then, I glanced at Daniel, where he stood by the window, shoulders squared, making a show of being calm. He caught my eye once, only once, with that same polished smile he had tried out in the kitchen 2 weeks ago. The smile said, I see you. No one else does. That's useful. Clara. Lana's voice cut through like a bell, pulling me from that gaze. The programs need hand-tied with eucalyptus sprigs. We're short on ribbon. Could you? On it, I said, setting down the last tie, hanging it careful as if it needed me to love it. Out in the vestibule, I tied sprigs to programs until my fingers smelled like a garden I could never afford. Then I placed name cards on the reception tables, rearranged a seating chart when someone added a last-minute couple, ran bottled water to the bridesmaid suite. Every time I came and went, Isabella cataloged me with long, bored eyes. At one point she said, Clara, sweetie, can you sew? A little. Could you tack this hem? It snagged. She hiked up her dress with the entitlement of a queen offering a ring to kiss. I took the needle from the emergency kit and knelt on the cold tile, stitching the loose lace while she scrolled through her phone, thumb flicking, mouth parted, a small shine of gloss catching the light. When I was done, she stood, looked down like a benefactress. Good girl. I swallowed. You're welcome. The bridesmaid's room was saturated with hairspray and the jittery electricity of women who had already decided they were beautiful and just needed reality to catch up. Victoria stood in front of the mirror in her robe, smile coiled, eyes dry. When she saw me, she lit up like stage lights. Clara, you're here. Could you be a doll and run my dress to the sanctuary? Lana said the priest will let us hang it on a pew for photos. Careful, it's heavy. She gestured to the garment bag. I slid my arms under it and felt the weight pull me forward like a promise I couldn't keep. It's stunning, I said, meaning the craftsmanship, the way the lace spilled like frost. I know, Victoria replied, not cruelly. It's just fact. With the dress on my shoulder, I shuffled past Mom, who leaned near Isabella, whispering. I heard my name and the soft hiss of two women sharing a petty cigarette of gossip. Don't want any surprises, Mom murmured. Isabella made a face. Please. The only surprise would be if she did anything worth remembering. They chuckled. The air in my chest went tight and small, a paper bag crumpling. I set the dress in the sanctuary with the careful reverence of a museum conservator and made for the side aisle to steal a moment at the holy water font. I dipped my fingers, crossed myself, and felt ridiculous not for the gesture. But because part of me begged that water to wash away the worry trembling under my ribs, I'd just drawn breath when Father Thomas appeared by the side door. He was a compact man in his 60s, kind eyes lined with a lifetime of listening to people at their most honest. "Good morning, Clara," he said, low enough not to echo. "Busy?" "Very," I said, smiling in a way I hoped didn't look like a wince. He studied me, saw more than was offered, and nodded. "If you need a quiet second, the side chapel is open. You're allowed to be more than useful today." "Useful is my specialty," I said. He tilted his head. "There are other specialties hidden in you. Don't let them keep you in the shadows." His words slid through me like light through glass. "Thank you," I managed. Then the cathedral door groaned, and a stream of early guests began to trickle in. Perfume and polished shoes and the rustle of good fabric. Lana flapped like a bird, herding them to the guest book table. I stepped back into the current and retrieved my assigned place card. Clara's seat, L23, left aisle rear. Back left, where the sound is muddy and the view is mediated by heads. Of course. I tucked the card into my clutch and went to do one last sweep of the pew ribbons. On my way, I ran into Dad. He was handsome in his tuxedo, the way men become handsome when their suit does the work. He looked at me as if I were an employee arriving for the afternoon shift. "There you are. Your mother was worried you'd gotten distracted." "I've been here since 7:30, I said lightly. "Ties, programs, hymns, the works." "Good," he replied. "Try not to draw attention. This is Victoria's Day." "I know," I said. The sentence so familiar it might as well have been the Lord's Prayer. He leaned in as if to kiss my cheek, then hesitated, patted my shoulder instead, and moved along. The place he didn't kiss burned anyway. The next hour was a choreographed madness. Guests arrived by the dozen, laughter lifting to the stone rafters like balloons escaping hands. Cousins I hadn't seen in years pitched their hellos past me toward my parents. Old family friends gathered around Daniel like iron filings around a magnet. Isabella and the bridesmaids emerged, a curated flock of swans, cooing, fluttering. Every compliment thrown their way had this soft thud of something rehearsed. When the photographer called for family photos, I stood to the side, unsure where to place myself. The phrase "family" has a way of making one's feet heavy. Mom waved her hand once, dismissive, as if to say, "Not now, darling," and I felt myself step backward on instinct. The camera clicked and flashed the parents, the bride, the groom, the golden triangle of belonging. Then, as if remembering a misplaced prop, Lana glanced around and said to me, almost as an afterthought, "Clara, could you pop into just one shot for posterity?" I stepped to the end of the row, a quiet punctuation mark in a sentence that didn't require me. The photographer peered into his lens. "You, Clara, could you lean in a touch? And maybe tilt your chin." "Great, perfect. Now everyone closer." When the photo took, Isabella leaned just enough to fill the space I occupied. Her shoulder unintentionally on purpose nudging me outward. I made a tiny adjustment accommodating my own erasure. "Lovely," the photographer chirped. "Now just the immediate family." I took that as my cue and slid away. No one noticed. Or if they did, no one corrected it. In the bridesmaids' room, a handbell rung a cute old-fashioned signal from Lana that it was time to line up. My chest contracted. The procession would begin any minute. Guests were already standing in clumps, heads turning toward, the narthex-like flowers chasing light. I found my seatel to 3 on, sat with my knees together, clutch under my palm, trying to breathe like a normal person. Around me, chat arose, swelled, dwindled. Across the aisle, Aunt Marlene whispered, "She looks like a princess," and someone answered finally, "Our family has a proper show." The organist began a prelude, something almond sweet and appropriate. Lana sent the grandparents. Then Dad moved with Mom on his arm, pausing halfway down the aisle so the photographer could capture the performance of grace. Ethan followed with a bridesmaid, grinning like a man about to be knighted. The groomsmen fanned out. Daniel took his place at the front, face composed, mouth not quite smiling. A hush fell. Everyone stood. Victoria appeared at the doors on Dad's arm. For a moment, despite everything, I felt a twist in my gut that was almost sisterly awe. She was radiant in the way a diamond is. Radiant, cold light, sharp edges. People made little sighing sounds. Phones lifted. A sea of screens bloomed. The string quartet pivoted to Pachelbel as if the composer himself had crawled out of his grave to insist on it. As they started down the aisle, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Lana again bent low so her whisper melted into my hair. "Clara, the Unity candle's missing a lighter. Could you?" Now I blinked. "They're halfway down." "Please." "There's one in the sacristy by the hymnals." And Father hates delays. If the candle won't light, well, it'll look symbolic. I stood automatically. Of course, even now, I was an errand runner. I slipped out of my pew and moved along the wall, keeping my head down so I wouldn't block anyone's video. The side hall was narrow and cool. My flats made no sound. I found the sacristy, rifled through drawers until metal flashed. Lighter. I closed my fist around it and hurried back. The swell of music tugging at my feet. As I reached the edge of the sanctuary, Isabella appeared like a guard dog. "Where were you sneaking off to?" "Unity candle." I lifted the lighter. She pursed her lips. "Good. Try not to trip when you slip back." "Into your section." She gestured to the back rows as if geography connoted character. I returned to L23 as Victoria reached the altar. Father Thomas welcomed everyone with a warm cadence I'd heard at baptisms and funerals alike. He spoke a few words about love as the willingness to see one another fully. The phrase nicked me, to see one another fully, and I felt my eyes sting for reasons that had very little to do with romance. The ceremony moved through its choreography. Readings were read. Aunt Marlene pronounced Corinthians with the weight of a woman who needed you to hear that love is patient. Love is kind, and that sometimes the people saying those words were neither. The string quartet nudged us into a hymn. I sang softly, the words slipping from childhood like old pennies from a jar. Then came the homily. Father Thomas spoke about commitment as a practice, not a performance. He said, when you promise before God and your community, you aren't promising to be perfect. You're promising to be honest and to keep choosing each other when honesty hurts. At the word honest, I watched Daniel's mouth twitch, just a flicker. A tiny skip in the continuous reel of composed expressions. A water drop of dread slid down my spine. I shook it off. He was probably nervous. Everyone was. So was the brass candle snuffer when it wobbled. During the sign of peace, Mom turned to me just far enough to tap 2 fingers against my wrist, gay ghost of contact, and said, "Peace," like a password. I murmured it back. Dad didn't turn. Ethan waved 2 rows up, too busy clasping palms with a woman who giggled like an ice cube in a glass. The Unity candle came next. Victoria stepped forward with Daniel, each taking a lit taper. They approached the central candle. I slid the lighter onto the shelf beneath the pedestal, out of sight, duty complete, and invisible by design. They tilted their flames toward the wick, and the wick caught, flared, steadied. A tiny collective exhale. A symbol established. A relief expressed. Then the vows. It's strange, the silence that falls in a room when promises are being made. It's like everyone is holding their breath together, as if breath itself might jostle the future off its fragile track. Father Thomas turned to Daniel. "Daniel, do you take Victoria?" "I do," he said, half grin, eyes glossy under the lights. "To be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," he said again, one corner of his mouth lifting. The cadence was cocky, a man too aware of his own handsomeness. I glanced at Victoria, who smiled like a queen receiving tribute. She turned to me just for a second, just long enough to see me in the second to last row. And her gaze moved through me as if I were made of air. "Victoria," Father Thomas said, "do you take Daniel?" "I do," she said in that clear, delicate voice of hers, the one that made people lean in as if to sip it. The rings were produced by a tiny cousin who wore suspenders and moral superiority. Ethan fumbled the cushion and got a laugh that went to his head like champagne. Daniel slid the ring onto Victoria's finger with the flourish of a man performing for cameras, which he was. By the power vested in me, a sudden, spicy heat flared under my skin. It began at the base of my neck and licked upward, the kind of heat embarrassment makes, but I wasn't embarrassed. I shifted in my seat, the lace at my collar scratching, the world unaccountably fizzy. 2 rows ahead, Isabella turned just enough to watch me. A small smile tucked into the corner of her mouth, as if she'd been waiting for some precise moment to register. I leaned forward, trying to get a deeper lungful of air. The cathedral's smellflowers, perfume, candle wax collapsed into something too sweet. My head felt buoyant. I pressed 2 fingers to my temple and counted. 1, 2, 3. I now pronounce you. I swallowed hard. The heat shuddered down my arms, then pooled in my fingertips. Prickly, insistent. I lifted my clutch and saw that it was ajar. Inside, a small amber bottle nestled against my lipstick. It wasn't mine. I didn't own anything that color. The label was fancy script. Eau de Rose Parfum d'Ambre. My throat closed in a half-cough, half-sputter. Isabella's voice, low as the hum of a refrigerator, drifted back to Rose. Allergic. I turned, startled. Her face was politely blank, but her eyes were glittering. I blinked, my tongue thick. 2, Rose, I managed. I told Mom no's. Ah, she said, soft, almost sympathetic. Must have wafted. These old churches trap everything. My brain did a double take. I hadn't taken a single step near the bridal bucaya peonies. Lily's garden, roses specifically chosen despite my known allergy. Because roses are classic Clara, as Mom had said in April. I had been careful. I'd avoided leaning close to any arrangements, detoured around tables where blossoms massed like cloud banks. And yet the scent burned in my lungs with surgical precision. I snapped my clutch fully open. The bottle was nestled in there like a planted bomb. I could see through the glass that a good third of the liquid was gone. A whisper of memory bloomed a moment when I had set my clutch beside the sewing kit in the bridesmaid's room. The way Isabella had leaned close to check the hem. The way Mom had lifted the clutch to move it, her mouth still moving around small words. A flush crawled up my arms, not from the perfume now, but from something hotter and uglier. Deliberate. They had put this in my bag deliberately. Whether to disorient me, make me leave, or cause a scene didn't matter. The result would be the same. Clara causing problems. Clara sensitive. Clara dramatic. I closed the clutch with a quiet snap. My lungs pulled a tight breath. I had been careful for years. That was the thing. Careful never to give them ammunition. And here it was anyway, lit and handed to me in a pretty bottle. Up front, Father Thomas said, "You may kiss the bride," and the cathedral swelled. Daniel lifted Victoria's veil in a gesture that should have been tender and was somehow calculated. They kissed, mouths pressed like a good seal on a jar. Phones blossomed above the pews, capturing the sanctioned intimacy. People clapped. I didn't. My hands were locked together so tight my knuckles showed white. The perfume scalded my throat. I slid out of my seat before the recessional, kept to the wall again, and ducked into the side chapel where Father Thomas had said I could breathe. I inhaled through my nose, slow, counted 4, exhaled through my mouth, counted 4. A faint breeze slid through the tiny stained glass window. A mercy. I pressed my forehead to the cool stone, tasted mineral, whispered to no one. Hold. The organ groaned to life with the recessional. Guests poured out in a giddy stream to line the steps and toss flower petals that someone had insisted were confetti but classier. I waited until the aisle was empty, then slipped into the nave to drop the planted perfume at the sacristy sink. I turned the tap, ran water over my hands until the faint film of scent lifted. When I emerged into the bright day, the crowd was cheering. Victoria and Daniel descended like movie stars. Mom dabbed theatrically at dry eyes. Dad beamed. Ethan punched the air. Isabella laughed too loudly and touched Daniel's arm as they passed. A gesture that registered as too familiar to anyone not drunk on spectacle. On the steps, Aunt Marlene spotted me and squealed. "Clara, there you are. We thought you'd miss the most important part. You always wander." I was asked to help, I said even as the words dissolved into the open air. "We're headed to the Garrison," she chirped, naming the reception venue like a magic spell. "There's a slideshow. You're in some of the pictures, I think." From when you were all kids. So sweet. So sweet. I smiled a shape that felt like a bandage. The car ride to the garrison was a small altarpiece of cruelty. Mom, Dad, and Ethan rode in the family car. I was waved toward a shuttle with overflow guests, which is what you call people who don't fit into your version of a story. On the bus, a cousin I barely knew asked what I did for work, then averted his eyes halfway through my sentence as if I'd suggested something obscene. A woman in pearls asked if I was helping with the catering, and then seemed disappointed when I said no. The garrison rose out of the trees like a polished barn dressed for a magazine. Inside, the reception hall glittered with lights strung like constellations. Round tables in white cloth, tall centerpieces like pale forests, a dance floor big enough for 100 careless choices. I found my seat assignment taped to a gilded frame near the entrance. Table 19. Tables 1 through 5 were family. Tables 6 through 10 were close friends. 11 through 15 were VIPs and business contacts. 19 was the far back by the doors to the kitchen. Every time the waitstaff pushed out with heavy trays, the doors would bang my chair. I pressed my fingers into the cardboard card where my name was printed in a delicate script. They had chosen a Flourish Y font that turned my name into a curl of pretty nonsense. CLA are almost clear, but not. At table 19, I found a couple from Daniel's law firm, a college roommate of Victoria's I'd met twice, and 2 of Isabella's friends who wore matching bracelets and smiles that never reached their eyes. One of them, a brunette with a serious chin, leaned over as I sat and said, "You're the sister, right?" The middle one? "Yes, cute dress," she said, which in her tone meant good effort. The music started something orchestral with a beat. The bridal party entrance unfurled, couple after couple sliding into hoots that leaned on the line between fun and performative. Ethan did a dumb spin that made people clap. Isabella blew a kiss that made people cheer. Finally, Victoria and Daniel entered arm in arm under a tunnel of raised hands. And the room swelled again with adoration so thick you could smother a small mammal under it. We were instructed to sit. The salads arrived, artfully tumbling arugula around a poached pear. The dressing was, of course, rose vinegar. I pushed the plate aside, told myself to wait for the next course. Isabella drifted past our table like a patrol boat and paused to lay a hand on my chair. "Everything all right?" She cooed. "Fine," I said. "Shame about the salad," she said sweetly. "It's my favorite." I stared at her, then at my untouched greens, then back. "Odd choice for the menu," I said flatly. "Given, oh." Her eyes were all pupils. "My allergy," I said. She put a hand to her mouth in mock horror. "We must have how careless. I'm sure there will be something you can eat later." She tapped my chair and floated away, leaving a wake of perfume that felt like a smirk. After salads, the slideshow began. The lights dimmed. Someone's aunt hushed everyone as if we were in a theater. The first image was Victoria as a baby. Cheeks like dumplings, eyes huge. Then Daniel in a little tux at a kindergarten recital. The room cooed, then laughed, then cooed again. Children, ponytails, soccer trophies, prom photos, the narrative of 2 golden people tracked by loving cameras. Then family vacations flickered onto the screen, beach trips, Christmas mornings. In one photo, the 3 of us, Victoria, me, Ethan stood in front of a snowman. I remembered the day, my hands numb, my nose red. Dad telling me to go fetch more coal for the eyes. Victoria saying her fingertips were too precious for wet snow. Ethan throwing a slush ball that hit my jaw. On the screen, I was cropped to half, my shoulder edging the frame, my face turned to the side. The caption read, "Victoria and Ethan, best sibs ever." The room all wed. Another photo, the spring recital where I'd played piano. I remembered practicing until my hands ached in our cold living room. The slide showed Victoria in a blue dress holding her violin, Ethan in a blazer with his arms slung over her shoulder. Dad with a bouquet for Victoria, Mom adjusting Ethan's tie. In the far corner of the frame, blurred, was me in a black skirt sitting alone on the edge of the stage, hands folded. The caption, "Vic's Big Night." People clapped, then laughed because the laughter had nowhere else to go. At table 19, one of Isabella's bracelet twins leaned toward me. "Ah, they're so cute together," she said, meaning Victoria and Daniel, meaning Victoria and anyone close to her. "You must be so proud." "I'm something," I said. The slideshow ended with a heart-shaped collage of Victoria and Daniel kissing in various tasteful ways on foreheads, on cheeks, in sunglasses, by oceans. The lights came up. I found that my nails had pressed half moons into my palms. I released them, and color rushed back, hot. Toasts commenced. Dad went first. He spoke about Victoria as if describing a saint nicknamed ROI. He said, "From the moment she was born, we knew she was destined for greatness," and everyone nodded like there was a spreadsheet to back it up. He barely mentioned Ethan, and he didn't say my name at all, not once. It was a masterclass in omission, and he didn't even blink. Ethan followed, happy to be adored. He told a story about Victoria covering for him when he snuck out in high school. "She's always been our fearless leader," he said, and grinned sideways at the room's approval. Even Clara, he tossed it off like a bone, always looked up to her. I mean, we all did, but, Clara was extra. People chuckled. He made a helpless little shrug that said, "What can you do?" I laughed twice a quick bark, and then the kind that tastes like metal. Isabella took the mic. Of course she did. She wore sincerity like a borrowed coat. When Victoria and I met in freshman lit, she said, hand to heart, I knew I'd met my person. We've done everything together. She's the sister I chose. And now she's found Daniel, who is like the male version of her, smart, driven, perfect. She paused for effect. Families are complicated. But today shows us that chosen family is real and it's powerful. We all know Victoria's always had to be the glue, holding everyone together when others wandered. So here's to finally having a man by her side who gets it, who sees her the way we do. She raised her glass. The room murmured a hear, hear. I felt the words land with surgical precision. Chosen family, others wandered finally. It was a map of exclusion disguised as a compliment. The mic passed to Daniel. He stood, grin preloaded. I won't keep you long. Just a few words about my beautiful wife. To think that a boy from Pinecrest and a girl from Willow Heights could meet and complete each other well. That's the American dream. He chuckled. That polished sound. I want to thank my in-laws for welcoming me like a son. And I want to thank Victoria for making me a better man. She's the kind of woman who deserves everything. He turned casually toward the room's back left. His eyes found me with a speed that didn't match the casualness. He lifted his glass in my direction, small, tight. And to those who know what they deserve and what they don't, he said, may we all find our proper places. It was clever, so clever most people wouldn't hear it. But I did. And so did Isabella, who smiled into her flute. And so did Mom, who watched me from table 2 with a face like a censer. The clink of cutlery against crystal chased itself around the room. I took a breath. Another. I stood carefully and crossed to the bar for water. The bartender handed me a glass and a wedge of lime. You look like you need this, he said. I look like a lot of things, I said, and drank. When I returned to table 19, a place card lay across my plate I hadn't seen before, as if it had grown there. My name in the same curly script, and underneath in smaller print, guest, not sister, not family guest. It might have been a mistake. It might have been a thoughtless template. It might have been anything. But a low sound pressed up behind my breastbone, and I set the card down as if it were a live thing. The doors behind me swung again with a clatter and a gust of kitchen air. Plates of chicken arrived, shingled in sauce. I pushed mine aside. Somewhere near the head table, Mom laughed the way she laughs when she's achieved an outcome after a long chess game. The first dance happened Victoria and Daniel, moving through choreography, practiced and paid for. The room went soft. People sighed appropriately. When the father-daughter dance came, Dad took Victoria's hand with the pomp of a man accepting an award he never doubted he'd get. While they swayed, Isabella appeared at my elbow again, voice pitched to kindness and coming out like a blade. If this is too much for you, you can always step outside. No one will judge. I'm sure no one will, I said. She leaned closer so I could smell the faint ghost of rose clinging to her skin. Some roles aren't for everyone. Victoria was born to be center stage. It's not a crime that you weren't. And you? I asked. She blinked, surprised I'd fire back. I'm a supporting lead, she said cheerfully, as if we were in a theater and she had a program with our names in print. And Daniel's the male lead, of course. Everyone has their place. That's how stories work. Some stories, I said. Darling, she said, and patted my arm. All the ones that matter. She left me with that like a party favor. I felt oddly calm, not happy, not even angry in the hot, familiar way, just clarifyingly calm, like the moment when a pond stills and lets you see the trash at the bottom. I picked up the guest card, turned it over, and found a small note in Mom's handwriting. Be gracious. Don't make this about you. The pen stroke on you dug an indent in the cardstock. Something in me clicked. Not snapped. Not broke. Clicked like a lock whose tumblers have finally found their shape. I stood. My chair scraped the floor with a soft protest. I smoothed my dress, slipped the card into my clutch alongside the empty perfume bottle's memory, and pushed through the door onto the terrace where the night was varnished with summer. Below the terrace, the lawn sloped to a stand of trees lit with white fairy lights. People smoked in little circles that pretended to be private. Laughter drifted out like fugitive energy. I stood at the railing and tipped my face to the air, cool, unperfumed, kind. Behind me, the DJ's voice boomed for the bouquet toss. A ring of women formed on the dance floor, good-natured frenzy swelling. I watched through the window. Victoria held her bouquet to the side, fake-tossed once, twice, then flung it backward. The flowers arced like a comet and landed in Isabella's waiting hands. Cheers detonated. Isabella pressed the bouquet to her chest and made a surprised face she had practiced yesterday. Daniel clapped and leaned toward her to say something that made her throw her head back, throat exposed. Clara, said a voice behind me. I turned. Father Thomas stood half in shadow, half in the spill from the hall. Hello, Father, I said, trying to find my old manners. He stepped closer, his gaze gently exact. You look like someone who has been asked to carry a great deal. I'm excellent at carrying, I said, and let the smile slip. I'm not as good at placing burdens down. He nodded as if that made theological sense, which in its way it did. Sometimes people hand us what they can't hold themselves. That doesn't mean it belongs to us. Hard to refuse a gift when everyone's watching, I murmured. He tipped his head, choosing his words the way a good man chooses a quiet truth. If a gift wounds you, it isn't from God, even if it's wrapped in ribbon. I looked up into his face and felt the sting unhitch a fraction. They put perfume in my clutch, I said softly. They knew. He didn't pretend not to understand. He didn't say, surely not. He didn't say, I'm sure it was an accident. He simply said, I'm sorry, in a way that made the apology sound like a blessing and an indictment both. Inside, a microphone squealed with feedback. The DJ announced, now, let's bring our lovely couple back to the floor for a little game. How well do they really know each other? Laughter swelled, eager. Daniel and Victoria sat back to back, each holding one of the other's shoes, ready to answer questions like, who's the messy one? And who said I love you first? A carnival of cuteness. I felt suddenly tired, bone-tired, tired enough to move heaven. I took a step toward the door. Clara, Father Thomas said, paused. He studied me like a man reading a weather vane. If you need to say something true today, I will hear you. I met his eyes. For a heartbeat, something like safety passed between us. Then I nodded small and went inside. The shoe game had the room in its pocket. Daniel answered in ways that made him seem harmlessly vain. Victoria answered in ways that made her seem adorably controlling. Everyone laughed in the right places. The choreography was working. The story held, until it didn't. The MC said, final question. Who keeps secrets better? Daniel held up his own shoe, grinning. Victoria hesitated. then lifted hers, slow. The room oohed. Isabella barked a laugh that sounded like a dropped glass. The MC crowed, moved on to instruct people to find their table numbers for dessert. Servers emerged with plates of small cakes topped with rose petals. I did not touch mine. When Victoria stood to circulate royalty receiving fealty, she passed by table 19. Our eyes met. The world narrowed to a tunnel between us. "Are you enjoying yourself?" She asked the question square as a white plate. "It's beautiful," I said, which was true and not. "I'm glad you're here," she said. A sentence that might have been magnanimous if it hadn't landed like a benediction given to a beggar. She reached toward my plate, plucked a rose petal, and held it up. "You should try the cake. It's divine." "I'm allergic," I said. She made a helpless face. "Oh, Clara, you always have something." Then she smiled, moved on, lights swarming her like insects around a lantern. The DJ called for everyone to join the couple for one last group photo, the shot that goes on holiday cards and office desks. People crowded the dance floor. I hovered at the edge, unsure as ever whether I was included in everyone. "Clara," Lana hissed from the periphery, flapping her clipboard. "Could you grab a stool for Grandma June? Quickly, quickly." "Course." I scanned the walls, found a folding stool near the band, carried it through the cluster of bodies to the front where Grandma Junetine, ancient, alive out of spite, waited like a shriveled queen. I set the stool behind her as the photographer counted down. 3, 2. As I stepped back, Isabella reached and set her hand gently, oh, so gently, against my shoulder blade, pushing. My foot hooked the stool leg. I stumbled, arms windmilling, clutch flying, the guest card flittering out like a pale, traitorous moth. I caught myself before I fell entirely, but my knee hit the floor hard enough to flash white across my vision. The room gasped, then laughed, not cruelly at first, but the way people laugh when something awkward happens and they need a release valve. Isabella bent hands to her cheeks. "Oh no, Clara. Are you okay?" Her voice so concerned, her eyes vivid with victory. I stood, heat ricocheting through me. My knee throbbed. I gripped the edge of the nearest table until my knuckles chimed. Mom appeared as if summoned, face pinched. "Clara," she hissed, low and lethal. "Honestly, could you stop turning today into a pity display? Go sit. Or better yet, go home if you're going to make a scene." A wash of silence opened near us as people pretended not to listen. Dad kept his chin up, gaze slid past. Ethan snorted a laugh he tried to convert into a cough. Victoria watched from the center, her smile unmoved, the edges fixed like a bead of epoxy. I looked at Mom and felt the years stacked behind Mitha's socks on Christmas, the cropped slideshow frames, the little taps of dismissal, the perfume bottle thudding against lipstick in my bag. I saw the long corridor of my trying, lined with doors never opened. In that quiet valley of breath before the next humiliation, Father Thomas's earlier words threaded through my mind. "If a gift wounds you, it isn't from God, even if it's wrapped in ribbon." I bent, picked up the guest place card, and turned it over in my hands. Then I slipped it into my clutch and straightened. "Clara," Mom said again, sharp as a snapped bone. "Don't you dare." I didn't shout. I didn't weep. I didn't plead or explain. I did the thing they never planned for. I walked past Mom, past Isabella, past the tight smiles and the open cameras, and I headed straight for Father Thomas, who stood near the doors, watching me with an expression I had only ever seen on people who had decided at last to act. "Father," I said, my voice steady enough to surprise me, "I need to speak to you. Privately. It's important." He didn't ask what. He didn't make me summarize my pain in front of the people who profited from it. He placed a hand at my elbow and guided me into the hallway, where the muffled music beat against the walls like a far-off heart. In that corridor, lit by a single sconce, I opened my clutch and showed him the bottle, the card, the small note in my mother's slanted hand. I kept my voice low, but the words firm. "I can't let this story be told the way they want it told. Not anymore." He listened. He asked 2 questions, simple and direct. He looked at the things I placed in his hand as if they were relics capable of setting down a past. Then he closed his fingers around them and nodded, sharp, decisive. His eyes flaring with a quiet fire I had only ever seen when he preached about truth. When? I asked, because when had become the only word that mattered. He glanced toward the ballroom doors, toward the swell of surface joy. He looked back at me. Soon, he said, and when it happens, you won't be alone. I exhaled long and clean. In the next room, Daniel's laugh rose above the crowd, bright as a strike. Victoria's voice followed, sparkling. Isabella's perfume seeped under the door, faint but persistent. I squared my shoulders, smoothed my dress, and for the first time that day and maybe in my life, I felt my height. Okay, I said. Okay. We stepped back toward the double doors together. I placed my hand on the handle. On the other side, a ballroom, a family, a story about to be rewritten. I met Father Thomas's eyes. He gave me the smallest nod, the kind that can tip a world. I pushed the doors open, and the room turned its face toward us like a sunflower. The orchestra swelled. Daniel lifted his glass, ready to toast to a victory he hadn't yet won. Victoria stood in the circle of light, perfect as a finishing touch. All I could think was, at last they are going to see me. Fully when we pushed back through the double doors. The ballroom looked stage lights honeying the faces, stemware catching stars, joy arranged in concentric circles. I felt it like a set I'd been standing behind my whole life, watching from the scaffolding. Father Thomas touched my elbow once, a signal, and then let go. He didn't rush. He didn't bark. He simply walked the way a man walks when he knows he has the right to be anywhere. The DJ was mid-joke, the band ready to swell into some Motown crowd pleaser. Father stepped onto the little dais near the head table and lifted his hand. "May I have your attention, please?" He didn't shout, but the room obeyed. The music dipped like a curtsy and stopped. Conversation smoothed shut. At the head table, Victoria turned, smile set but eyes quick. Daniel's grin hung in the air a fraction too long before reattaching to his face like it belonged there. Mom looked at Lana as if to say, "Fix this," but Father Thomas had already taken the microphone from the stand. It made a small, respectful sound in his hand. "Thank you." He surveyed us with the calm of someone who has seen many versions of most human things. "I won't take long. I know you're here to celebrate, but I am compelled, in conscience, to address something serious." A cold wave rolled across the room, lifting goose flesh. Beside me, a fork clinked against a plate and went still. Isabella, 2 seats down from Victoria, went perfectly motionless in that special way a guilty person can. Like a cat flattening against a windowsill, pretending to be a cushion. My teeth touched and stayed there. From the back, someone laughed by reflex and then swallowed it whole. Dad sat up straighter. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks as if this were about him. "A sacrament," Father said, gently, "is not a performance. It is an act of truth before God and your community. When that truth is compromised by coercion, by deception, or by an impediment, we are obligated to pause." He let the word sink its small, strong anchor. "Today, new information has come to my attention, and because of it, I must stop this celebration as a sacramental event until we examine that information fully." The room made one sound with many mouths. A soft, outraged inhale. Victoria went very pale under her makeup. Mom stood, one hand snapping reflexively to her pearls, and found no pearls there. "Father," she said tightly, "what are you doing?" "Serving the truth," he answered, so simply it sounded like an apology you couldn't refuse. Daniel laughed, practiced. "I'm sure this is a misunderstanding," he said, genial. "Hands up." "A paperwork thing." Father Thomas didn't look at him. "Victoria," he said, meeting my sister's eyes with compassion. "And everyone who loves her, please know that I am not here to wound you. I am here to protect you." He turned, and his gaze opened like a door to the whole room. "And to protect the integrity of what we have just witnessed." "What does that even mean?" Ethan muttered, but too loud. His voice carried. Laughter flickered in a few throats, then died when Father lifted a hand again. Before any couple stands here, he said, the church is required to investigate whether there is any impediment to marriage. Those impediments include prior bonds and legal contracts. I received this afternoon evidence of such an impediment. You could feel the crowd lean forward, the way people do on roller coasters when the track clicks toward a drop. What impediment? Mom demanded sharply. She had the look of a woman who believes that if she names the monster, it will go out of respect. Father Thomas reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and removed a slim folder. He held it calmly. A civil marriage certificate. The words landed like a nail driven straight. For Daniel Adrian Mendoza and Isabella Cruz, executed in Clark County, Nevada 8 months ago. It remains active, unannulled, undissolved as of this morning. For a second, the room didn't understand. You could hear cutlery cooling, glass settling, someone's bracelet sliding against their wrist. Then comprehension snapped through like a power line catching on a branch. "What?" Victoria whispered. Then louder, body lurching before voice. "What?" My heart didn't race. It stilled as if every beat were a clean page. I watched Daniel's smile do something I had never seen it do. It failed. It tried twice to stand and couldn't. Isabella didn't blink. Her pupils flared until her eyes were all night. "That's absurd," Mom snapped. "This is a lie. Who would fabricate mother?" Father Thomas said mother. Not Mrs. Barrett, not Mamand. His voice was so gentle that the word gentled the room. "I would not fabricate this. I have confirmed it. A colleague at St. Jude's in Las Vegas, Father Gabriel, contacted me after I reached out this afternoon. He recalls a private ceremony in a non-denominational chapel performed by a civil officiant. He saw the couple in the waiting area. He recognized Mr. Mendoza because of a prior retreat. He has provided a sworn statement. I also have a copy of the filed certificate. He did not wave papers like a victorious attorney. He simply held the folder like a burden. "Oh my God," someone murmured. Another voice, "Did you know?" From somewhere toward Daniel's parents. Daniel ran a hand down his tie that didn't need smoothing. He turned that hand palm up. Charming, weaponized vulnerability. "All right," he said. "Too bright, too easy. Yes, Isabella and we did something stupid in Vegas. It was a joke. A bit, after a work event. People do wild things there." He gave the room a helpless grin. "We meant to fix it. We thought it didn't count. It wasn't serious. It was a drunken dare. A mistake." His eyes slid to Victoria, then back to the crowd, calibrating the exact amount of contrition to dispense. A good lawyer appealing to a soft jury. "An active civil contract is not a joke," Father Thomas said, almost kindly. "And a lie told to a woman you intend to wed before God is not a small thing." A tremor moved through Victoria's shoulders. Daniel reached for her hand out of reflex. Out of habiten, she yanked it back so fast her bracelet snapped and beads rolled like tiny moons across the linen. "You told me," she said, voice gone hoarse. "You told me you never," she swallowed. "You said I was your first serious. You said Isabella was your friend." Isabella's composure cracked. "I am his friend," she said, too fast. "Vic, calm down. This doesn't change anything about calm down." Victoria's laugh skittered and fell off the edge. "You married him?" "Not married," Isabella said. And for the first time I saw panic dent the practiced gloss of her face. "It was Vegas, okay?" "We didn't think that seems to be a theme," Father Thomas said, sadness threading the words. "My mother, who could move armies with a phone call, found herself choosing a battlefield she didn't understand." She slid her eyes to the room and tried a smile that had closed many deals. "Everyone," she said, chuckling, "let's not be dramatic. We'll clear this up in the morning. No need to stop." It was Victoria, and the word came out like a blade pulled cleanly from a sheath. The room froze in relief at a clear order. She stood. Her chair tipped, then settled. "Tell me the truth," she said to Daniel directly. The air between them like glass. All of it. He did that handsome sigh men like him do, head tipped, mouth slanted, eyes cast down as if a deep scriptured humility had seized him. "Vic, I love you," he said softly, And the softness, the deliberate caress in it made me want to tip the table. You know that? This was before you and I were 8 months ago, she said, voice flat. We were together 8 months ago. He blinked, calculating again. The arithmetic of lies is rarely neat. His lips parted. Isabella filled the air he couldn't. It was casual then, she said, brittle. You two weren't engaged. Victoria stared at her. The kind of stare that stops clocks. Then she turned that stare on Mom. Did you know? Silence is an answer when it comes right away. Mom's face went neutral, which is to say it confessed. People make mistakes, she said tightly. I believed Daniel when he said it was nothing. Do not punish a moment of carelessness with carelessness. The word tumbled out of me before I knew it was mine. It rang too loud in the sudden quiet. Heads pivoted in my direction the way sunflowers pivot to light. You put rose perfume in my bag and called that carelessness. For a half second, my mother looked human caught, ashamed, a little girl in her face showing through the lacquer. Then she did what she always did. She steadied and she lied. That's ridiculous, she said crisply. Why would I? She didn't do it alone. I didn't need to look to feel Isabella's eyes burn. But she didn't stop it either. A murmur ran through the guests. Not a cruel sound, more like the sound you hear in a pine forest when the wind shifts, and 1,000 needles answer. Father Thomas inclined his head toward me, a formal nod. I hear you. Then he faced the crowd again. You all can sort your hurts later, he said. Composure wrapped around sorrow. Right now I must tell you plainly, the church cannot pretend we do not know what we know. Until the civil impediment is resolved, what took place earlier this afternoon cannot be recognized as a sacramental marriage in this parish. The word cannot hit like a judged gavel. Someone toward the front stooped Daniel's father, tall, silver hair, outrage polished to a high shine. You had no right to humiliate my son, he barked at Father. You should have spoken to us privately. Father Thomas took the blow and did not move. I attempted to, sir, he said. 30 minutes ago I asked for the couple and their immediate families. I was told by the planner that the timeline did not permit a meeting and that I should save my words for Sunday. I do not have a Sunday not committed to God and truth. All eyes slid to Lana, who looked like a bird who had flown into a clean window. I thought. She stammered, then shrank into her headset. I apologize, Father said to her, and it was real. We should never ask the wrong people to guard the right door. For a heartbeat, the room held. Then sound erupted in overlapping waves, questions, denials, phones breathing to life like electrified eels. Cousins murmuring, Aunt Marlene clutching her pearls, now found and real. Ethan shot to his feet. Vegas. He blurted, suddenly 14. Dude, I told you that chapel looked sketch. I thought you were joking, Ethan, Mom hissed, but the hiss arrived too late to snatch the ribbon back onto the spool. Which chapel? Someone asked in that mean, curious way. Candlelight something? The lady wore angel wings. It was epic. He tried to grin, then realized he was not in a frat house and sat down as if yanked. Victoria's hands were shaking. She folded them deliberately to hide the quake. She looked at Isabella and, with a voice that could have cracked ice on a river, asked, And are you pregnant? The word glowed in the air like a flare. People's heads snapped. Isabella's chin lifted a fraction. No, she said. Then she added because she was bad at silence. Not anymore. A sound rose from the room, ugly, sympathetic, judgmental, relieved. I couldn't parse it. Daniel swore under his breath. Victoria shut her eyes a moment. When she opened them, the room had cooled to an operating theater. You told me you wanted a family, she said to Daniel. Not a scream, not a sob. A statement entered into the record. You stood in front of God and promised to choose me. And I did, he shot back. Saintly patience cracking. I am. This was before. It was a mistake. It has nothing to do with what we have. Lies always have something to do with what we have, Father Thomas said, like someone noting the weather. They changed the we. Enough, Mom snapped, the command ringing on reflex. This is a reception. We will not make a circus of our family." Father Thomas turned and regarded her as if she were a student in a class he did not plan to fail. "Madam, with respect, your family made a circus of someone else's daughter's trust," he said softly. And the softness made the sentence draw blood. "And you helped. I held my tongue when I saw you usher your middle child to the back row like a coat you were tired of carrying. I held it when I watched another woman weaponize her allergy to humiliate her. But I cannot hold it at the altar. Not there. Not with vows." I felt the words move into me and piece together the parts of me that had been unglued and floating for years. Beside the bar, the bartender, the one who'd given me water, spoke up, unexpectedly brave. "Excuse me, Father?" He lifted a small envelope. "A courier dropped this with the office for you earlier. The coordinator said to give it to any clergy if we saw you. I forgot in the rush." Father Thomas took it, opened it, scanned the contents. His mouth went a line. He held up a printout so the head table could see, if not read. "For those concerned with verification," he said without triumph. "This is a certified copy of the Clark County certificate with the clerk's seal. There is no ambiguity." Daniel's face pinched in a way that wasn't handsome. "You think you can embarrass me and walk away?" He said, not to Father anymore, but to the room, to the fact of consequence itself. "We'll get it annulled. We'll fix it. This is nothing." "You can't annul a lie," Victoria said. "You can dissolve a contract. You can't make it not have happened." For a moment, I saw her. Not the girl in the slideshow. Not the princess on the steps. A woman finally seeing the scaffolds of her life and choosing, maybe for the first time, not to climb them. She turned to me. That surprised everyone, even me. For years, her gaze had skimmed past me like a skipped stone. Now it landed. "Stayed? You knew something," she said. "Not accusation. Archaeology." "How long?" "Not this," I said. "Not the Vegas piece." I felt off. With him. With how I flicked my eyes toward Isabella. She put perfume in my clutch today. So I wouldn't be able to stay. Victoria's mouth drew into a line that looked like my mouth. "Why?" "Because I see," I said simply. "And because it's easier to call a witness disruptive than to listen." Behind us, someone muttered, "Amen," and didn't know they'd said it out loud. Laughter flickered, real this time, a small mercy. Isabella stood abruptly, chair legs screeching. The room flinched. "Enough," she said, voice slicing. "You all act like this is a trial. It's a party. Yes, I love him. Yes, we were stupid. But he chose you," she snapped at Victoria, "because your life is clean. Because your parents are money and power dressed as taste. Because your version of family looks good on a Christmas card." She thumped her chest with a flat palm. "He loved me because I am real. Because I don't ask him to be anyone but himself." "Who is that?" Father asked, genuinely curious. Isabella glared. "A man who gets what he wants." "Ah," Father said softly. "That is not the same as a husband." Something in Daniel finally cracked. He rounded on me as if the shortest route to safety was through my body. "This is your fault," he spat. "Polish stripped. You never fit. You make everything heavy. Your family was fine until you needed a cause." The laugh that came out of me surprised everyone, including me. It had no bitterness in it, just a kind of bright disbelief. "You did this," I said, and gestured at the papers in Father's hand, at Isabella, at Victoria's barren all the ways face. "You and the truth did this." I just stopped agreeing to be quiet. A sizzle of applause broke from the back hour table, the bar. A few brave cousins no longer able to swallow their yes. It wasn't triumph. It was relief, like a collar unbuckled from a throat. Father Thomas cleared his throat, gentle, restoring. "Friends," he said, "I'm going to ask we close the bar for a few minutes. I am also going to ask that those of you who are immediate family, the word held all its weight now. Not just the part it had been used for. Step with me to the side room so we can speak without an audience." "No," Mom said, too fast. "We will not be paraded." "You have been parading for decades," Father said. And if a man can be both kind and unappealable, he was. This is a conversation. He set down the microphone without the show of release and gestured to a pair of double doors. Victoria moved first. Not stooped. Not shattered. She moved like a woman who needed a table between her and the world and knew where to find one. Daniel hesitated until his father touched his shoulder and pushed. Exactly the way Isabella had pushed me, surgical, proprietary. Isabella started forward, then checked when father shook his head. Not you, he said. You will have your own conversations. Their eyes clashed, spark on water, then broke apart. Mom and Dad followed brittle. Ethan trailed, chastened for once. I started after them. Instinct, a little embarrassed to still be alive, that old middle child Fashawn Carey thing. Father lifted a hand. Clara, he said. Come. That single word undid a knot I'd been sleeping tied in for 30 years. In the side room, sound fell away as if someone had drawn a curtain. There was a round table and 8 chairs. We took them like people who had never sat before. Father remained standing, not as a punishment, but because he belonged in the middle of the crossing. I'm going to be very plain, he said, resting the file on the table. Your vows are suspended pending resolution of the civil marriage. The reception is no longer a sacramental celebration. You can choose to keep your guests fed and safe and send them home. You can choose to explain or not. But you may not pretend. That's absurd, Mom said again, but it didn't have the same spine. She looked at Dad for alliance and found a man staring at his shoes as if they belonged to someone else. Perhaps he was seeing his life from above for the first time. Perhaps he was counting carpet threads. Men find their own ways to hide. Victoria, Father said, and his voice changed. It gentled further. You are not ruined. You are rescued. That is not what you wanted today. I know. But it is a mercy nonetheless. She made a little sound, half sob, half laugh. It sounded like when someone drops a glass and it doesn't break. Clara, he said then, and I startled like a horse touched kindly. You brought me 3 things. A bottle planted to harm you. A card demoting you from your own family, and a note instructing you to disappear. They are small corporals of a larger cruelty. I am sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I did see and didn't act until now. That will not happen again. My throat worked. Words pressed up and then lay down. All I could manage was, thank you. Do you think I should call the police? Victoria asked, voice oddly pragmatic. About the perfume. About anything. Not today, Father said gently. Today you call your lawyer. And your therapist. And your friend who tells you the truth and brings soup. Justice is not always handcuffs. Sometimes it is a letter and a boundary. Mom bristled. We do not need therapists, she hissed, as if the word were unclean. No, Father answered, eyes kind and merciless. You need to learn to love your children, ma'am. A good therapist will help. There was a long, creaking, quiet. Finally, Dad lifted his gaze to his eldest. Victoria, he said, voice rough, we'll make this right. She barked a small, surprised laugh. Dad, she said, without malice, I don't think we have ever made anything right. We make things look right. That's not the same. The words didn't hit him. They opened him like a window finely painted loose. Ethan rubbed his face. He faltered. I'm sorry, Vic, he said. To his credit. I knew about Vegas. I thought it was a bit. I didn't think it would matter. Victoria looked at him a long time. It always matters, she said. We're just the ones who never wanted to. Father's hand rested on the file. Here is what will happen, he said calmly, and laid out a path as if smoothing a map. The diocese would be notified. The sacramental register would remain unsigned. If Daniel dissolved the civil marriage and they wished to pursue counseling and begin the premarital process anew, that could be discussed in 6 months at the earliest. There would be no rushed cleanness. There would be no pretending this had only been a smudge. And you, Father added, turning to me with a look that knocked a breath out of my lungs in a way that didn't hurt. You will go back in there and stand wherever you wish. Not because you need to be seen by them, but because you have a right to your own life." I nodded. That single action felt like a vow I could actually keep. We rose together, less like a family and more like a group of survivors evacuating a theater after the sprinklers go off damp. Blinking alive. Father opened the door. Sound flowed in again, a lower, uncertain murmur as guests tried to decide what the script required of them. Before we stepped through, Mom touched my arm. The gesture was not a caress. It was a claim. "If you say a word to anyone," she began. "Mom," I said, and her mouth snapped shut, not because I had shouted, but because I had never interrupted her without apology before. "You don't control the words now. You never did. You just controlled the rooms. I don't live there anymore." She blinked. The first crack in the lacquer widened. She let her hand drop. She didn't nod. She didn't weep. She simply followed the people who were leaving the version of reality she had curated. Back in the ballroom, Father Thomas reclaimed the mic, the poor thing exhausted by events. "Friends," he said, and the word had never sounded less like a platitude and more like a request. "Here is what we're going to do. The kitchen will bring coffee and dessert. The bar will remain closed for the next hour. After that, you're welcome to celebrate one another as neighbors, as coworkers, as cousins, as people who came together meaning well. If you need to go, go with peace. If you need to stay, stay with kindness. There will be no more speeches." A sound like a released breath rose and fell across the room. People adjusted. People are very good at adjusting when given permission. Victoria stepped up beside him, and he stepped back, yielding a little rectangle of light. She searched the room until she found me. She held my gaze for a full count of 3, then nodded, tiny, sovereign. She turned to the crowd. "I'm not going to defend myself or him," she said, and a ripple of something like respect moved through the guests. "I'm going to defend the truth. Thank you for coming. Thank you for caring about me. I need time. Please don't post videos or hot takes. Please don't text me advice. If you're my friend, you know my number. If you're not, you'll hear whatever you're owed in time." She stepped down. A handful of people clapped. More didn't. It didn't matter. The sound that followed was better than applause. It was quiet. At table 19, my half-eaten chicken glistened like a metaphor. Isabella hovered near the doors, undecided, then spun on a heel and left like a woman who had just realized the house. Lights had come up and everyone could see the stage makeup. Daniel stood at the bar with 2 of his law firm friends who were not brave enough to be near him, yet not brave enough to be seen, not near him. He pointed at the bartender for a drink and stopped when the bartender lifted his palms and shook his head, closed, his mouth shaped. For the first time in half a day, I liked a rule. Guests began to murmur their way toward exits or coffee urns. Aunt Marlene bustled to me as if her bustle were an ambulance. "Clara," she breathed, "what a scene. Are you all right?" "I'm strangely fine," I said, and realized it was true. "Do you remember when you gave me socks for Christmas when I was 9? She flinched, mortified. "Oh, honey, that was the first time I learned I would be useful to this family, and that might be enough." It wasn't. I'm done being useful in the ways that erase me. She bit her lip, fierce. "I'm sorry." "Me too," I said. "But sorry is a start." She hugged me awkwardly, then properly. When she moved away, Dad hovered in the place she had left, hands empty. "I don't know how to fix this," he said quietly. "You can start by saying my name," I answered. He looked at me a long moment, something like water starting finally to move under winter ice. "Clara," he said. I nodded. "We'll take it from there." Across the room, Father Thomas bent to say something to the pianist, who nodded and put his hands to the keys. Not a triumphant song. Not a dirge. Something simple. The kind of melody you can put a new life on. I walked to the edge of the dance floor. It's the place where I had fallen 15 minutes earlier, where the stool had stood like a tripwire. The floorboards were smooth. My knee ached. I pressed my palm to the wood and whispered. Not a prayer, not a curse, just a sentence that belonged to me. "I'm here." Behind me, someone cleared their throat. "Victoria, walk with me," she asked, small. Not a queen. Not a child. My sister. Okay, I said. We crossed the floor together, to women who had both been told different lies that made the same shape. You're only as real as the role you play. The shape didn't fit anymore. It split and something new stepped out. We didn't get far before a voice called our names. Mother. She stood there, hair perfect, face trained, but one line near her mouth had given up its job for the night. Behind her, Ethan watched me with a look I couldn't parse yet. Dad stayed a step back, like a man waiting his turn in a line he should have joined years ago. Clara, Mom began, then looked at Victoria, then back. Girls? Her voice softened on the plural. I had the strange sense that she'd never said that word to us without an agenda. We are leaving, she said, as if she were excusing herself from a disappointing play. We will call in the morning. To discuss. Logistics. What about apologies? Victoria asked evenly. Mom swallowed. It clicked in her throat. Those two, she said. It sounded like a concession to an enemy that had advanced too far to be pushed back. She touched my shoulder, one of those small maternal gestures she deployed like confetti for the cameras. This time, it didn't land the way she intended. It was just a touch. Skin to skin. No magic. They left. People parted, then closed like water. The room loosened. The pianist kept playing. Coffee steamed. Someone laughed for the right reason at the right volume. I watched Daniel exit a side door with his parents. A man used to moving through doors others held open. No one rushed to follow. Beside me, Victoria's hand brushed mine. Not an accident. A question. I answered it. We stood together in our quiet. Somewhere near the kitchen, Lana cried silently into her clipboard. Mascara tidy. The bartender handed her a napkin and said something that made her give a choked laugh. Human things were returning to themselves. Father Thomas came by us then, stepping without hurry, and paused. You both were very brave, he said. Brave and good are not the same word, but they're neighbors. Spend some time on that street. He gave us a little bow that was not ironic. I'll be in my office tomorrow after the last mass, he added to both of us, as if talking about medicine and mercy at once. Doors open. He moved on, a small storm of blessing in a black suit. Victoria let out a breath that had been keeping her ribcage company for years. I don't know what tomorrow is, she said. Tomorrow is not this, I said. She nodded. Good. We stayed until the room felt like a place people could be again. Then we slipped out to the terrace. The night had not noticed any of it. Crickets still sawed. The trees still kept their counsel. The sky was an untroubled bruise of blue. I loved him, Victoria said, without drama. I know, I answered. He loved her, she said, and even there she did not have to say the name. I know, I said again. And he loved himself most, she whispered. Yes. She looked at me, searching my face the way you search a map after taking a wrong turn. Not for blame, but for orientation. How did you learn to stand in a room that wants to erase you? I surprised myself by smiling. Badly. At first I said, then with witnesses. You just learned it with a whole town watching. I touched her elbow. You'll be okay. She leaned her head against my shoulder for half a minute the way she may have done when we were small, if we ever had. Maybe we had and I had forgotten for safety. Maybe we never had and were borrowing it from another life. Either way, it fit. Inside, the pianist shifted to something brighter. Not triumphant. Just walkable. The door opened and a wave of warm air rolled out. Vanilla and coffee and a little sweat and a lot of not pretending. We turned toward it together. The twist had knocked the legs off the table. The feast could still be eaten. Not in the way it was plated. Not in the order the menu declared. But enough for the hungry to be fed, for the liars to go home empty. For me to feel my own body from collarbone, to heal and believe it belonged to me. And for the first time in any room with my family, I was not waiting to be asked to leave. I was deciding whether to stay. I stayed. I didn't expect justice to sound like the clink of a spoon against porcelain. But that's what it sounded like when the busboy set a coffee cup in front of me, as if he'd been saving that exact act for the most precise moment my hands were steady enough to hold it. Inside the garrison, the air had changed. The lights were a little softer, the conversations lower, the pretense bled out like heat after a storm. The pianist kept to a safe middle path, no showy chords, just a line we could walk without tripping. "Miss," the busboy said, hovering, "we've got plain vanilla. Slices in the back." Chef says, "Sorry for the oversight." "Thank you," I said, and meant it with a weight I'm not sure he could have known to expect. He grinned and vanished, and I stood with a cup warming my palms, feeling the tremble in my knees subside. Across the room, Daniel held court with two men who looked like versions of him 10 years from now. Expensive haircuts, expensive watches, expensive concern. The men did not clap him on the back. They did not grip his arm in solidarity. They gestured small inward. "Lawyer up. Spin this. Get out." Isabella had disappeared. A rumor passed that she'd left crying. Then another rumor that she'd left furious. Then a third that she'd left indifferent. All three were probably true. Mom and Dad had exited with the dignity of people who don't know where to put their hands when the script is gone. Ethan lingered near the coffee urn, cup in both hands, eyes unfocused. He looked young for the first time in a decade. Victoria reappeared at my side like a decision made. She'd taken her earrings off. Without them, her neck looked less like a pedestal and more like a place a person's head would live. She set her empty hands on the back of a chair and kneaded the wood as if it were a living thing that might answer her. "Stay," she said, and I did, because she'd asked like a sister and not like a queen. We did not speak for a long minute. People skirted the edges of our quiet, glancing, then looking away. Father Thomas stood by the door, gentle as a moon, intercepting anyone who came toward us with more curiosity than kindness. The bartender kept the bar closed, a small dam for a room that might otherwise flood. In the stillness, a thought rose, simple as bread. If I leave this night the way I came, I will have taught them nothing about me. Not revenge, not spectacle, truth. I wanted a new thing to be true, that I could choose my place in a room, that I could talk without asking the room's permission. I touched Victoria's elbow. "Can I do something?" I asked. "Not at you. Not at them. For me. For us." She looked at me a long time, weighing my face against whatever ledger she'd been raised to keep. Then she nodded once. "Yes," she said. "Do it." I set my coffee down, walked to Lana, who looked like she had finally unclenched the jaw she had been born with, and asked for the mic. Her fingers fluttered on the clipboard. She glanced toward Father Thomas, who tipped his chin infinitesimally. She handed me the microphone like a fragile egg. "No speeches," Father had said earlier. "Necessity has a way of making exceptions clear." This wasn't a toast. It was a correction. I stepped to the low dais at the head of the room, the one where Dad had removed my name from the narrative by never saying it. The mic felt heavier than it looked, as if the weight of other people's words had settled inside the metal. I could feel the familiar heat flush my chest, the one that had always made me sit back down before I even stood. This time I stood anyway. "Hi," I said. The mic caught the small word and widened it gently. Heads turned. The pianist's hands stilled. Someone's chair creaked. "I'm Clara," I said, and heard a few surprised laughs around the room, not unkind. "I'm the middle child in this family. You might not know me." "That's not an accident." A ripple mixed. "I promise I'll be brief. I want to tell you one small story from today and then make one request." I felt Father Thomas's gaze like a steadying palm between my shoulder blades. Victoria had crossed the floor to stand at the edge of the dance floor where I could see her. She was listening the way you listen when you're deciding whether to keep someone forever. "I'm allergic to roses," I said. "That's not interesting, but it's relevant. I told my family weeks ago. The menu still included roses. The bouquet still centered roses. Today, a bottle of rose perfume appeared in my clutch with the cap off. I held up the small amber bottle Father had given back to me in the side room. A murmur. I spent the ceremony breathing through fire. When I left the pew to get air, someone called me dramatic. I met Isabella's empty chair with my eyes. I met Mom's absence. I met the place card that still said guest tucked into my bag like a dare. "Here's the thing," I said. I didn't come up here to humiliate anyone. I breathed, made sure it was true. I came up here because this day has been a masterclass in erasure. A woman I love was told a lie about the man she was marrying. That lie was huge. But beneath it were 1,000 tiny lies. The kind that looked like manners. The kind that looked like seating charts and captions under slideshows and perfume that must have wafted. Tiny lies that say, "You're not family if we decide you're not." The room stilled the way rooms do when something lands where it's supposed to. "I can't fix the big lie for Victoria," I said. "I can't dissolve a contract in Nevada with a sentence in New York. I can do something here. Right now about the little ones. So here's my request." I smiled, not sweet, not sharp, real. I'm moving my seat. A soft, confused chuckle. I walked down from the dais with the mic in one hand and my clutch in the other. People parted, curious. I crossed the room to table 2, where the immediate family cards still stood like little obelisks. I picked up the one that said, "Mother of the bride, forgive me." "Mom," I said to the heir, picturing her face tightening like thread. "You can have this back when you can use it like it means care and not control." I set my card Clara Barrett in its place. Then I lifted the chair with both hands, the scrape loud and deliberate, and turned it 2 inches so it faced Victoria, not the crowd. A small thing. A reorientation. Someone clapped. Then more. It wasn't a standing ovation. I didn't want one. It was acknowledgement. We see what you did, and we understand the size of it is not measured in pounds, but in years. I turned back to the room. "If you ever felt like the extra in your own family photo," I said, "come sit with me." My voice didn't shake. "You don't have to. It's just, there's room at this table. For real, physically." I smiled because it was funny. "We've got chairs." A pause. Then Aunt Marlene moved first. Bless her. She brought her place card with her, the way a child brings a blanket to a new bed. She set it down beside mine and squeezed the back of my chair in passing. "Should have done that years ago," she murmured. A cousin followed Nina. The one who had stopped coming to holidays when she married a woman the family called her friend for 3 years. She slid into the next chair with a grin that made my ribs ache with something like joy. "Guess the kids' table just got interesting," she said. 2 of Victoria's friends came too. Women I barely knew who had watched me quietly all night with gentle eyes. A neighbor who had always brought cookies and been told not to overstay. Ethan lurched toward us, then hesitated a foot away. It took him 3 breaths to decide. Then he slid his chair over like a man making reparations in inches. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He chose across the room. Daniel laughed too loud on purpose and said something to his friends that made their necks get tight. He set down his empty hand where a glass should have been and finally looked like a man who had run out of props. Father Thomas stepped to the mic I'd left on the dais. "I endorse this seating arrangement," he said dryly, and the room laughed, real and clean. "If you need help moving a chair, a server will assist you. If you need permission, you have it." The staff, God bless them, joined the small choreography with grace. 2 servers rolled over a cart of extra chairs. The busboy fetched water. Lana, mascara intact but humility cracked open, carried a stack of clean napkins like truce flags. People shifted a bit, enough to make it visible from the doorway that something like truth had reconfigured the map. We ate cake that didn't hurt my throat. It tasted like nothing in that wholly satisfying way, like food stripped of performance. Victoria came to stand with us. She looked down at the little cluster, at me, at the chair that had been her mother's. "May I?" she asked quietly. I nodded and pulled the chair out. She sat and slid her hand onto the table, palm up, a startled invitation. I laid my hand in hers. Her fingers tightened. Across the room, the pianist edged into a song with a slow, certain backbeat. It was the kind of song that asked nothing of you except to sway if you wanted to. A couple near the window took each other's hands and stepped onto the dance floor with that relieved, we survived look. Another couple joined them. Then a third. No announcements. No centerpiece of a bride and groom to orbit like obedient planets. Just people reclaiming an ordinary joy. I stood and tugged Victoria's hand. Dance with me, I said. She blinked, then smiled in a way I had never seen. Less porcelain, more dawn. Yes, she said, and we moved to the floor. We didn't know how to dance together. We learned in 40 seconds. It wasn't pretty. It didn't need to be. We held hands and moved in a small circle, two women calibrating weight and balance and where to look. People watched without staring. A few clapped softly on the 2 and 4. Nina whooped once and then covered her mouth like she had spilled something precious and then decided it was okay. Halfway through the song, a presence appeared at the edge of our circle, Dad, as tentative as a deer. He lifted his hand toward Victoria, the ghost of the father-daughter dance hovering between them. He didn't say anything. She looked at me, question raised. I nodded and stepped aside with the Mike's ghost. Still warm in my palm, she let him lead her into the next turn. It wasn't anything like the perfected choreography from earlier. It was better. He whispered something. She laughed, surprised, head tipped back. Not a performance for a camera, just a dot on their shared timeline that would mean something because it had cost something. I stood at the edge of the dance floor and felt a lightness creep up from my ankles. The weight I'd been carrying wasn't gone. It had simply shifted to another part of me where muscle could take it. Of course, the story wasn't done performing its last act of resistance. It never is. Every move forward has its loyal opposition. Excuse me, a voice bit at my shoulder. Daniel. He stood too close. The way men like him stand so the camera can't see the hand they put on your back. You made your point, he said, smiling without a single molecule of warmth. His breath had a stubborn sweetness, like someone who had been refused a drink and had decided to live off mints. Now you can stop. Stop what? I asked, turning fully to him. If he wanted to do this, we'd do it where everyone could see the shape he made when he thought no one was looking. Grandstanding, he said, eyes cutting over my shoulder to Victoria and Dad on the floor. You've had your little rebellion. Cameras caught it. Everyone gets their catharsis. Now sit back down and let the adults manage the fallout. You mean you? I said. And her parents, he said, with a small, contemptuous flick of his eyes toward the door where they had gone. This is out of your depth, Clara. Contracts, reputations, civil contracts in Nevada. I asked mildly. You seem familiar. His smile thinned. Careful. I tilted my head. Are you threatening me in a room full of witnesses? I asked at normal volume. Heads nearby turned. I let them. Because that seems off strategy. His jaw shifted left, then right, calculating the way he would calculate a jury. Then he tried a new tack. He softened, slipped into that silk he'd spun so well for months. Look, he said, hands opening in that bipartisan we're all friends here gesture. I messed up. I'll fix it. Vic and I will do counseling. We'll do the church's program. I'll sign whatever your father's lawyer puts in front of me. But what you're doing now? He gestured at the table, at the chairs I'd moved, at the small relocation of reality. You're burning bridges you'll need later. Think bigger. Don't be petty. I smiled, because the word petty made something inside me want to waltz. Every woman's liberation looks petty to a man who benefited from her obedience. I said conversationally, I'm not burning bridges. I'm naming them. If they collapse under a name, they were rope and hope, not wood and stone. A quiet ooh ran through the people closest to us. Daniel's ears colored. He stepped closer again. You're going to regret this, he hissed. Not as much as you regret forgetting which chapel you got married in, I said, and someone Ethon. Nina snorted laughter behind me that turned into a cough. Before he could reply, a hand landed firm and fatherly on Daniel's shoulder. Father Thomas. He didn't squeeze. He didn't restrain. He reminded. Son, Father said, gentle to the point of devastating. It is time for you to go. I'm not your son, Daniel snapped, the words breaking free of polish like a tooth through a lip. No, Father said, unoffended. But you are not any of these people's husband either tonight. Leave them to their healing. Or what? Daniel sneered, looking around at a room full of people who, for once, weren't trying to earn him. You'll excommunicate me from dessert. No, Father said softly. from the idea that your charm is a sacrament, that excommunication is already complete. The line cut so clean it cauterized. Daniel looked around for allies and found men who suddenly remembered they had wives to love properly. Women who had run out of appetite for the show. Security hadn't been needed all night. It wasn't needed now. He left not because someone hauled him out, but because he discovered the oldest force on Earth, a room that had decided it was done with him. He shoved the door with his palm and vanished into the night, a hinge echo marking his exit. A sigh of sound lifted and dropped like surf. Victoria stopped dancing and watched the door swing, then slowly close. She didn't cry. She stood taller. "Okay," she said aloud to the air, to herself, to the old story whose spine had finally cracked. "Okay?" The bar reopened an hour later, as promised. People drank with moderation and a weird, beautiful gratitude, like a thirsty group that had discovered water. The staff brought out trays of small, sane food, mini grilled cheeses, tomato soup, in-shot glasses, late-night fries. Lana came to our table and apologized to me in a voice so contrite it made me want to comfort her. I didn't. I accepted it with a simple thank you, and that was enough for both of us. Somewhere past 11, Mom came back. She stood in the doorway the way people stand on cliffs, calculating distance and risk. Dad followed at a respectful space. They had shed their entitlements somewhere in the parking lot and come back in their human clothes. Mom's face was carefully made again, but the eyes couldn't be relacquered. They were just eyes, the kind that sometimes didn't know where to look. She approached me first, not out of strategy, but because I was between her and Victoria. "Clara," she said, "not darling, not sweetheart, not stop. Just my name. May I sit?" I gestured to the chair I'd turned. She sat without trying to turn it back. She rested her hands on the table, fingers linked, the posture of a woman about to negotiate a merger. Then she broke form. "I am sorry," she said. The words were wary, like animals coaxed from a thicket. "For today, for the perfume, for the card, for a long time." Her voice flexed and held. "I have mistaken control for love, and excellence for virtue. It worked until it didn't, and then I blamed you for the noise of it breaking." She swallowed. "You deserved a mother, not a manager." I had imagined this moment so many times, me delivering a soliloquy with surgical cruelty, me refusing to forgive, me walking away with a soundtrack, but when it arrived, it looked like this. It's an older woman learning a new language in front of her child without a dictionary. "I can't decide what you deserve from me," I said softly. "I can only decide what I will give." I let the silence breathe between us. "I will give you honesty. I will give you time if you do not use it to erase me again. I will not give you my seat." She winced. Then she nodded once, as if the word no had finally sounded like love. "May I speak to your sister?" she asked. "You may ask her," I said, and stood to give them space without surrendering ground. I watched from a discreet distance as Mom approached Victoria, who was talking with Nina about something small and solvable, like houseplants or shoes. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. I saw Mom's posture soften at the neck where it had always been straight as a stake. I saw Victoria listen, then draw a boundary with her hand, palm up, the way we had practiced unconsciously all night. They did not hug. They did not perform reconciliation. They spoke adult to adult. It was better. Dad found me by the coffee. He held his cup like a relic. "I said your name earlier," he offered, as if aware of how small and how large that was. "You did," I said. "Thank you." He nodded. "I want to do it again," he said, and then did. "Clara, can we try? Can I try to know you in a way that does not require you to disappear?" It wasn't poetry. It was work. It sounded like a man who had not practiced this in his bathroom mirror, because it had never occurred to him he'd have to. The humility of it was almost unbearable. "You can try," I said. "It will be awkward." I smiled, not unkind. "We'll survive." He exhaled a breath I don't think he knew he'd been holding since I was born. "Okay," he said. At midnight, the pianist packed up and a playlist took over, something easy, something with a drum machine that said no one is watching. We danced the kind of dancing you do when no one is being graded. High school two-steps, auntie hips, dads doing the limited repertory of safe moves. Teenagers, ironically, then sincerely joining in. Ethan came to me and said, "I'm a jerk," like a man reporting on a weather pattern. I replied, "Sometimes," and we hugged like brothers and sisters hug when they decide to be siblings in the present tense. At some point, Father Thomas sat with our cluster and ate a slice of cake, fork held in his large hand like a child. He told a story about a couple who'd come to him years ago with a mess and left with a marriage. Not because the mess disappeared, but because they stopped pretending it wasn't there. "God loves a good broom," he said, smiling, and a window opened to fresh air. We laughed. We had earned the right to find things funny again. Before the night ended, Lana tapped a glass knot to summon silence, but to offer housekeeping. "Just a quick note," she said. "There are favors by the door. Please take one." She hesitated, then added very softly, "And if you see a staff member who's been kind to you tonight, tell them so." They were kind to me, too. People clapped for the staff. The kitchen doorway filled with sheepish smiles. The bartender lifted his towel like a flag. The busboy, my vanilla cake hero, bowed too low and almost dropped a stack of plates and then didn't. And the room cheered as if he'd landed a triple axel. None of this was part of the plan. That was the point. When Victoria and I finally stepped out into the night, the parking lot hummed with the quiet of cars cooling, cicadas stitching their small industrial song into the hedges. We stood under a string of bare bulbs no one had bothered to turn off. It felt exactly right. "You didn't burn it down," she said, surprising me. "What? The house I built in my head?" she clarified. "You didn't burn it down. You took out the rotten beams and told me to check the foundation." "I also moved a chair," I said, and we both laughed, the kind that released something old and unwelcome. She turned the ring on her finger, the one she had not thrown or thrown back. "Keep it," I asked. "For now," she said, "as an artifact. Not a promise." She slipped it off and placed it in the tiny pocket of her dress where lipstick lives. "I'll return it when I'm ready." "Not before." "Not because anyone tells me to." "Good," I said. "Make it expensive for him." We laughed again, that soft, conspiratorial kind that tastes like bread and butter. We stood in silence a while longer. People filtered past us to their cars, voices low, goodbyes gentle. A few came to say quiet things that were not gossip. "I'm proud of you." "That was brave." "Your cake was better than the other cake." We said thank you and meant it. We let the night take what it was owed. As we walked toward our cars, mine, the old hatchback with the transmission you had to speak kindly to. Hers, the sleek sedan, she drove like a permission slip. Mom and Dad approached from the edge of the lot. No ambush, no demands. Just bodies in space, hoping to be read correctly. "Good night," Mom said, and the word wasn't an ending this time. It was a comma. "We'll call tomorrow." "Call," Victoria said. "We'll pick up." We parted there, the four corners of a table with room now for all the chairs. When I slid into my car, the seat felt like it had been made for me and not for a ghost who'd keep it warm for someone else's use. I didn't drive home. Not immediately. I drove to St. Bartholomew's, parking under the shadow of the stone ribs and the stained glass that, earlier, had cut me into rubies and sapphires and bruises. The big doors were locked, but the side chapel father had said it was open late on Saturdays. I slipped in, the air cool and paneled with incense and old wood. In the small chapel, a votive rack glowed with fat little lights. I took a candle, dropped a coin in the box, and lit it with a borrowed flame. I didn't kneel. I sat on the little bench Father Thomas had once recommended in a homily for people who are tired, and I let my eyes rest. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say why. I didn't say please help. I just sat and thought of chairs moving and a priest holding a line and my sister's hand finding mine without looking. On my way out, I stopped by Father's office. The door was closed. A note taped to it in his tidy hand said, "In the sanctuary if you need me, or at the hospital, or asleep." Try all three in that order. FTI smiled to myself and left him to whatever version of mercy he was practicing at that hour. Outside, the sky had decided to be generous and make stars visible even above the town's polite glow. I stood there a minute, ridiculous in my dress and flats, clutched dangling perfume bottles still in it like a defeated argument. Then I slipped the bottle out and walked to the little parish trash bin. The one with the hinged lid on, dropped it in. It thudded like an ending. I closed the lid gently, the way you close a book you've finally finished reading. When I finally made it home, my apartment was the same size it had been that morning, but it felt bigger. The mirror over my dresser reflected a woman who had taken up space in public and not died of it. I unbraided my hair, washed my face, and sat on the edge of the bed with a guest card in my lap. The script was pretty. The cut was clean. I slid the card under my dresser with my toes and let it live there among lost safety pins and dust the right place for it. A ghost in a corner, powerless. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Father Thomas. I found your name in the parish database from the envelope. I shouldn't text after midnight, but I wanted to say, well done. Also, remember to drink water." Another beat. "And forgive yourself for any joy you feel. Joy is not betrayal." I laughed into my pillow and texted back, "Will do." Water achieved. Joy in progress. Another buzz a moment later. "Victoria, I'll come by tomorrow. Bring coffee. You owe me a dance lesson." I typed, "Deal. I'll bring chairs." She sent a heart. Not a cartoon one. The one her keyboard had, but it landed with all the equipment of the real thing. I slept like someone who had moved furniture all day and liked where the couch ended up. In the morning, because mornings still come even after nights, like that Kai woke to sunlight square on my floor. I brewed coffee and wrote 3 pages in the journal I used to fill with apologies and now filled with sentences that didn't ask permission to exist. The pages were not rage. They were inventory. I did this. They did that. We said this. Then the priest said that. All the pieces that made up something bigger than their sum. Then I dressed not in armor, not in performance, not in neutrality. I dressed like a woman who knows she might have to move a chair again and is not worried about wrinkling. When Victoria buzzed up, I opened the door to my little place and stood aside to let her in. And for the first time in our lives, the threshold didn't feel like a border. We made coffee. We set 2 mugs on my secondhand table, which wobbled unless you twisted one leg just so. Which we did, together, palms on wood, a geometry of accommodation that felt like practice for how to live. We didn't say, "How could he?" or "Can you believe, Mom?" We started with, "How are you breathing?" and "Want toast?" and "Do you like your eggs soft or not?" The drumbeat of an ordinary morning under an extraordinary shift. Her phone pinged once, twice, then went quiet. She turned it face down. Mine buzzed with a message from Aunt Marlena. Picture she'd dug up from the recital. Me at the piano, not cropped. Had the whole image, her text read. "I'm sorry I sent the other one. Here's the truth. I saved it. Not because I needed it to believe myself, but because evidence is a kindness for the days when your courage is low. There would be appointments and lawyers and statements and 100 logistics no one puts in movies. Because they're slow and unsexy. There would be days Mom would backslide into management. There would be nights I would hold the old shape of myself in my hands and wonder if it would be easier to put it back on. But the chair was turned. The priest had set the sacrament on a foundation that could take weight. My sister had chosen the floor where you have to look at real faces, not the stage where faces are for the crowd. And I had said my name out loud in a room that had taught me to whisper it. That was the justice I could deliver without becoming the thing I fought. Not revenge that burns indiscriminately. But an order rearranged so the right people had to look at themselves. I had learned the difference between being dramatic and being specific. Between being petty and being precise. Between being not family and being a person whose existence no longer hinged on any family's permission. When we finished our eggs, Victoria looked around my little apartment with a curiosity that made me want to keep it forever exactly as it was. "I didn't know you had all these plants," she said, touching the leaf of a pothos that had decided, in defiance of all odds, to thrive in a window that faced a brick wall. "They don't need much," I said. "Just light and not being drowned." She nodded, her hand lingering. Same, she said. We laughed. We started a playlist. We moved the coffee table to make space. And then I taught my sister to dance in my living room, barefoot pajamas, hair messy. No audience counting out loud, 1 and 2. 3 and 4, losing the beat, finding it again. Being silly, being terrible, being alive. Every few steps, I glanced toward the doorway, half expecting someone to appear and say she, or move back, or not here. No one did. The only voice was mine, saying, here. The only answer was hers, saying, yes. 3 weeks after the night, everything cracked open. I stood in the vestibule of St. Bartholomew's holding a cardboard box labeled in black marker. Fragile chair. It wasn't a chair. Not exactly just the place card from table 2. The broken pearl bracelet from the altar stairs that Victoria decided not to repair. And a handful of photos Aunt Marlene reprinted with the cropping corrected. Father Thomas had suggested we gather artifacts of the old story and decide together what to do with them. We could burn them, Victoria had said, half joke, half cantation. We could frame them, I countered, as warnings. Or we could store them until their temperature drops, Father said, practical. There's a cabinet in the parish hall that has survived every drama since 1961. That's older than any of us. Let it hold your heat. So here I was, box in arms, hailing a laugh under my breath at the absurdity of attending to our pain like it was a fussy heirloom. Need a hand? Father asked, appearing from the side door in his short sleeves, the summer heat making even priests mortal. I'm okay, I said, and he let me be okay. We walked to the parish hall where bingo cards, marriage prep, community breakfasts, and memorial receptions all happened without contradiction. The cabinet was indeed ancient toque heavy, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old paper. He opened it with a key the size of my palm. Inside, stacks of things that mattered once and no longer burned. Candle snuffers that didn't snuff, sheet music everyone used to fight about. A felt banner declaring joy from a class that must be grandparents now. I slid our box onto the bottom shelf. We stood a second. It felt like leaving flowers at a grave and then deciding instead to plant a tree. Okay, I said. Okay, Father echoed and shut the door. If you ask me when resolution started, it wasn't that night at the garrison. It was the morning after, when the messy work began, appointments, unlearning reflexes. Good stories often end where the fireworks explode and the villain storms off. Real life, I learned, ends with laundry and lists. Victoria called her lawyer on Monday. She called a therapist on Tuesday. On Wednesday, she called me from her car, voice steady, eyes watery. I thought it would hurt more, she said, surprised. It will sometimes, I said. It's practicing grief without reheating the lie. What do I do when I miss him? She asked. Make the missing honest, I said. Miss the part that was true. Don't miss the costume. We made a rule. We would not talk about Daniel after 8 p.m. We would not Google Isabella at all. We would remind each other when we slipped. That curiosity wasn't the same as care. We slipped a lot. We remembered a lot, too. The diocese sent a letter. Warm sympathy, clear boundaries. The sacramental record remained blank. If in 6 months, Victoria still wished to pursue premarital counseling with anyone, and the letter did not say Daniel, she could. For now, they encouraged her to treat the wound, not the wedding. Father Thomas brought the letter to her apartment with a lemon loaf from a parishioner and a prayer said in the kitchen like we were all just people, which we were. Mom called on Thursday. Not at dawn, not at midnight tat, exactly 4 in the afternoon. It's like a person who had made an appointment with humility and showed up on time. May I apologize now? She said without explaining. Yes, I said. She did. She did not cry. She did not ask for forgiveness like a refund. She said the specific things. I asked you to be useful instead of loved. I believed a man because he looked like what I wanted for our family picture. I punished you for not being a picture. I tried to choreograph your reactions to a life I scripted without your input. Then she added, almost shy, that's the long sentence. The short sentence is I'm sorry. I kept my voice gentle and unflinching. "Thank you," I said. "If you want to keep moving, here's a boundary. If you ask for my help, say please. If you criticize me, ask if I want advice. If you feel the urge to assign me an invisible task, assign it to yourself and see if it's still necessary. And if you're tempted to call silence grace, call Father Thomas instead." She made a sound like a laugh, stepping carefully. "Deal," she said. And for once, deal didn't sound like negotiation. It sounded like joining. Dad started texting me 2 times a week with questions so earnest. I screenshotted them to send to Victoria because they were almost adorable. What book should a man read to learn how to see his daughter? Is it normal to feel ashamed for punctuation I left out of sentences 20 years ago? Do you want to go to the farmer's market on Sunday, or is that a weird thing to ask? I told him to read Between the World and Me, even though he wasn't the target demographic. I wanted him to practice hearing a voice he'd never had to hear. I told him, yes, shame for old commas was normal. I told him the farmer's market sounded perfect as long as he didn't accidentally buy roses. He sent back a photo of tulips with a caption, "Safe." We met at the market and walked as if learning each other's stride. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, he used my name. He said, "I don't know." I believed him. It was progress. Ethan apologized too, without the armor of jokes. He came over with pizza and soda and genuine embarrassment. He took off his sneakers at the door. He sat on my couch like a boy afraid of breaking a good chair. He said, "I'm learning how not to be the main character." I said it helps to have other characters around. He said, "I still want to be funny." I said, "We still want you to be funny." Then we watched a movie with explosions and no subtext and laughed until our throats hurt. On his way out, he looked at my plants and said, "How do you remember to water them?" I shrugged. "They ask." He said, "I'll listen." As for Isabella, I didn't see her again. A cousin said she posted a long crying video 2 days after the wedding, then took it down. Another cousin said she'd told her office she was on leave for a personal tragedy, which was both accurate and misleading. I did not feel victory when I thought of her. I felt a strange, companionable pity. We had both been trained to be useful to systems that reward harm. The difference was I had stopped. And Daniel. A handful of mutual acquaintances said his firm asked him to work from home for a while. Someone reported his parents had booked a trip to Italy where no one had to look at them and they didn't have to look at anyone. I had a recurring thought I didn't share. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Not because he couldn't hurt me. Because I had finally located the lever he could not pull. My consent to be small. A week after we put the box in the cabinet, Victoria and I hosted a dinner at my apartment. Nothing curated. We made pasta, burned the first batch of garlic, streamed music with ads because I refused to pay to be told what to listen to. We invited Aunt Marlene, Nina, and her wife Jules, Father Thomas, Ethan, and Dad. Mom asked to come and I said yes with a caveat: arrive as a person, not as a coordinator. She texted back a thumbs up emoji, which made me bizarrely proud. I set the table with mismatched plates I'd thrifted over the years, the ones my family used to tease. Bohemian student vibes, cute but chaotic. That night they looked like a design choice. Truth has a way of making everything look intentional. People arrived with salads, wine, a chocolate cake that came slightly lopsided out of its box. Dad brought tulips. Mom brought herself and a bag of ice. Most unglamorous, perfect contribution. Father Thomas brought an apology for showing up in collar on a weeknight after promising he wouldn't. We told him clergy were allowed if they didn't bless the spaghetti. We ate. We talked about the weather like amateurs and then about books like friends. No one brought up the wedding until Jules asked carefully if this is too much. Tell me to hush, but how are you? The question landed on Victoria and me both. A gentle weight that did not demand performance. We answered as if we were writing the same paragraph. We're tired, I said. We're relieved, she added. We're sad, I said. We're clear, she added. We're busy, I said. We're not in a rush, she added. And the chorus around the table nodded in rhythm. Midway through the meal, Mom put down her fork and looked at me like someone about to try a new step. Clara, she said, Can I ask you something that may sound small and is not small to me? Yes. When you were little, she said carefully, and we took those pictures at the beach with the matching blue shirts. Did you notice that I put you on the end every year? Yes, I said. The word was not cruel. It was simply the truest word available. Why didn't you say anything? She asked, not accusing, genuinely baffled. I did, I said. Twice. You called me sensitive. I decided to become invisible instead of fired. It seemed like the safer job description. She winced. I don't know how to live with that, she admitted. But I want to. Live with it by doing the opposite now, I said. Let us take turns being in the middle. It's good for everyone's neck. The table laughed blessedly. Even Mom laughed. The sound a little wet, a lot honest. Dad raised his glass. To the middle, he said, and we clinked with water and wine and seltzer and a fork, because Ethan couldn't find his glass. After we cleared plates and stacked them by the sink in a leaning tower of friendships. Father Thomas asked if he could say a 5-second blessing. On one condition, I said, no Latin and no metaphors about gardens unless someone else promises to weed. He grinned. Deal. He bowed his head and kept it truly brief. Thank you for this food and for the chairs we can move. Amen? We chorused amen like people who meant it. Later, when the apartment was a soft mess and everyone had gone, Victoria helped me wipe the table. She lifted a water ring with the heel of her hand and said, I never knew cleaning could feel like recovering instead of erasing. That's because you never had to do it, I teased. And she made her outraged face and then shrugged, because sometimes the joke was true. She stayed over on my couch that night, claiming jet lag from a trip she hadn't taken. We watched a bad show until our eyes fell shut. In the morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and Victoria whisper humming the counting from our living room dance lessons. 1 on 2, 3 on 4. It felt like someone had replaced the soundtrack of my life with one I could hum along to. I won't pretend every day was smooth. Some afternoons, Mom texted me seating plans for conversations. Can you talk Tuesday? But maybe keep it short. And perhaps don't bring up. I'd reply with a chair emoji and I'll face who I want to face. She began to respond with the same emoji. We developed a ridiculous code that became strangely holy. 1 chair for I'm listening. 2 for I'm moving. A chair turned sideways for I'm not ready. It kept the fight out of sentences that couldn't hold it. Daniel called once from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. He sent an email to Victoria 2 weeks later. She forwarded it to me with the subject line for the file, not the heart. It was a masterclass in non-apology apologies. I'm sorry you felt I didn't want to hurt. This got complicated. There's a version of us she did not answer. She sent it to her lawyer, who filed it under evidence of pattern. That was the justice she needed, not a dramatic showdown, but a paper trail that pointed steadily toward the door. Summer tilted toward early fall. The tulips from the market gave way to mums in front of the grocery store. Ethan started volunteering on Saturdays with a mentoring group that taught boys how to repair bikes and apologized to the right people. He sent us a photo of a kid beaming next to a fixed chain. Taught him to fix it and to say, I broke it without trying to be cute, he wrote. Progress. We spammed the thread with yeses. Dad asked if we'd like to go through the old photo boxes. I said yes on one condition. I would hold the scissors. We spent a Sunday afternoon at their dining table under polite light, reassembling a past that had been framed to tell one story and could hold another. We found snaps where I had been cropped to a shoulder and taped my fullness back on. We discovered entire roles where I wasn't present because the camera has been pointed at Victoria's medals or Ethan's goofy expression. We made a new album, all of us. The first page was the 3 of us building a snowman. My face turned fully toward the lens, red with cold, eyes laughing. The caption we wrote in careful block letters, best sibs ever, actually. Mom cried when she saw it, not politely. Dad let her, which years ago would have looked like weakness and now looked like strength. One Sunday after Mass, Father Thomas asked if we could stay a minute. We sat in the front pew like incorrigible children. He perched on the rail as if balancing between worlds. "I want to tell you a thing I tell couples," he said. "It also works on families. Reconciliation is not returning to what was. It is agreeing on the truth and building from there." "Are you building?" "We're trying," Victoria said. "You are succeeding," he said, and I believed him because he had stopped pretending success looked like smiling. On the first cool night of the season, Victoria and I took a walk through the neighborhood where we grew up. The houses had changed in small ways: new paint, gone hedges, a different kind of minivan in a driveway, but the sidewalks still remembered our feet. We turned down the block with our old house. Lights glowed in the front room, where a stranger now read a book. We stood across the street and didn't trespass on that family's story. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly, I miss being little enough to think all of this could be fixed by trying harder." She slipped her arm through mine. "Same," she said. Then she laughed, soft. "You know what line of father stuck with me?" "Many," I said. "He's a factory. You'll never get an annulment for a lie," she said. He wasn't just talking about the civil thing. He meant the lies we told ourselves. There's no paperwork that makes them unhappen. You just stop living by them. "Look at you," I grinned. "Theology." She bumped my hip with hers. "I prefer chirology," she said. "Turn, sit, stay." We stopped at the corner where the bus stop still leaned like a tired uncle. There was graffiti on the metal now. "You aren't crazy. IT was that bad." Someone had drawn a little chair beneath it. I laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that throws a rope to everyone who needs it. "I'm taking a picture," I announced. I sent it to Mom, Dad, Ethan, Aunt Marlene, Nina, Jules, and Father Thomas. The replies came back fast. A row of chairs, a row of hearts. Single amen. That's the thing I learned. Closure doesn't slam like a door. It slides into place like a window you finally get unstuck. It's mundane. Texts with chair emojis. A mother asking, "Please." A father saying, "I don't know." A sister returning a ring, not with a flourish, but in a registered envelope with a receipt. It's also luminous. A priest taking a microphone and standing between a lie and its target. A room deciding to be done with a man whose power required our silence. A chorus of people moving their chairs 2 inches toward the person who has been asked all her life to move 2 inches away. Sometimes I think about that bottle of perfume. In the story I used to write in my head, I smash it against a wall and watch it shatter, triumphant. Rose scent everywhere like a victory I can breathe. In the life I'm living, I dropped it in a church trash can and closed the lid gently. That's my kind of justice now. Not smashing, but placing. Not denial, but decision. A month after the garrison, Victoria mailed Daniel his ring. She didn't tuck a note inside. The receipt in her hand was the only sentence necessary. She texted me a photo of the envelope before she sealed it. A final small ceremony performed at her kitchen counter. I texted back 6 chairs. She sent 6 back. On a Saturday afternoon that smelled like apples and sweaters, we went back to St. Bartholomew's for the parish fall festival. Kids in face paint ran underfoot. A woman sold pies while lightly scolding teenagers pocketing extra napkins. A raffle table promised a basket of lotions I would never use. Father Thomas called bingo with alarming zeal. Ethan manned a hot dog stand and didn't flirt inappropriately with anyone. Mom and Dad held hands. It looked heavy and easy by turns. When we walked past the parish hall, Victoria tapped the cabinet through the wall and said, "Our box is in there." I nodded. "It can stay." Before we left, Father pulled me aside. "One last pastoral intrusion," he said. "Hands up." "Always," I said. "You did not get vengeance," he said. "You got order. It's less cinematic. It's more durable. When the old tremors come, because they will remember what you did on that dais. You put your name on a table and turned a chair. That is liturgy enough for a life." I thought of the microphone in my hand, of the scrape of the chair legs against the floor, of the shock that moved through the room not at a scandal but at a small specific act of self-placement. I thought of my mother's apology and my father's tulips, of Ethan's bike chains and Nina's shoulders dropping when she sat near me. I thought of Victoria's ring in an envelope and her hands in mine in a living room where the steps were counted out loud. "Thank you," I said, "for stopping the ceremony." He looked at me over the top of his glasses, humor, warm and precise. "You stopped it," he said. "I just said it out loud." On our way to the parking lot, a little girl in a superhero cape darted in front of me and fetched up short. Staring at my face like it held a map she recognized. "Are you the lady who moved the chairs?" she asked, simple, unsuspicious. I laughed from somewhere new. "Yes," I said. "Do you need one?" She considered. "Sometimes," she said. "At school, ask a grown-up to help you," I said, kneeling so we were eye to eye. "And if they don't, move it anyway. You're allowed." She nodded solemnly, turned, and ran toward a table where her father, his expression, tired and tender and trying, was unfolding more chairs. We drove home with the windows cracked to let the pie and grill smell rinse our hair. At a red light, Victoria reached across the console and brushed a crumb from my sleeve. The gesture was so ordinary, it felt sacramental. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For staying," she said. "For making me leave. For teaching me to do both." I smiled, thinking of how many times in my life I had left rooms early, quietly, like a ghost wanting to be polite. Now I understood. Sometimes you leave boldly and return on your own terms. Sometimes you stay and make the room fit. It isn't binary. It's choreography. When I got back to my apartment, the guest card was still under the dresser. I pulled it out with a coat hanger and studied the pretty font. The tidy loop of my name, the demotion printed like a fact. I could have thrown it away. Instead, I taped it inside the cover of my journal. A reminder not of the insult, but of the night I said my name into a mic and reissued myself a different title. Narrator. Not of their story. Of mine. I have learned to narrate without apologizing. To tell what happened without trying to make it palatable for those who benefited. To speak with the precision of a woman who knows what it costs to clear her throat. When people ask me, "Now, what happened?" I say, "They said I wasn't family." Then the priest stopped the ceremony. Then my sister and I moved a chair. Everything else is footnotes. What I don't always add but always think is this, and I have never been more at home. And that's how it all unfolded. My truth, my justice, my resolution. If this story struck a chord with you, don't just walk away quietly, stay with me. Hit that like button so I know you stood with me through every twist. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories where betrayal meets its reckoning. And where justice always finds its stage. And don't forget to ring the notification bell, because the next tale might just be the one you've been waiting for. Until then, remember, sometimes the best revenge is finally being seen.